The moment we realized someone had been following us through the woods, it was already too late to pretend it was just our imagination. We weren't alone anymore, and whoever was back there didn't want to be seen. What started as another stupid late-night adventure nearly turned into the worst mistake of our lives. When I was in college, my best friend, I'll call him John, and I were inseparable. We were roommates, classmates, and partners in every bad decision we ever made. Not bad in the sense of being clueless or careless with school, but bad in the way that two bored, impulsive guys can convince each other that almost anything sounds like a good idea at the time. We were always chasing adrenaline, sneaking into abandoned houses, climbing restricted structures like water towers, exploring places we absolutely weren't supposed to be. Most of it was reckless, sometimes illegal, and usually pointless. But it gave us stories to laugh about later. That night, oddly enough, we thought we were choosing something tame. Instead of rooftops or trespassing, we decided to explore the woods behind our town, late at night, just for the thrill of it. No real plan, just curiosity, flashlights, and the hope of getting that familiar rush. For context, our town was small and surrounded by forest on nearly every side. But the stretch of woods we wanted to check out was different. That side of town had been partially abandoned decades ago after a massive fire wiped out several neighborhoods. Most people avoided the area completely. No hiking trails, no houses, no reason to be there. Even John and I had never gone that far out before. That alone made it tempting. We grabbed our flashlights, stuffed them into our jackets, and headed out. It took about 30 minutes to walk from campus to the far edge of town, and another 10 minutes through the burned-out remnants of old foundations and empty lots before the forest swallowed the road entirely. Once the town lights disappeared behind us, the darkness felt thicker. The only illumination came from pale moonlight filtering through the branches and the narrow beams of our flashlights cutting shaky paths across the ground. At first, it wasn't very exciting. For the first 20 minutes or so, the woods felt exactly like woods. Trees, leaves, shadows shifting with the wind. The initial nervous energy faded once nothing actually happened. No strange noises, no movement, no abandoned structures or creepy discoveries. Just quiet. Then John stopped walking. He raised his flashlight and pointed ahead through the trees. "There," he said quietly. At first, I didn't see it. Then I caught it, a thin beam of light cutting sideways through the darkness in the distance. It wasn't moonlight. It wasn't reflection. It was unmistakably a flashlight, and it was low, close to the ground. We moved closer, stepping carefully between roots and fallen branches, until it became clear what we were looking at. A flashlight was sitting directly on the forest floor, turned on. No person in sight, no backpack, no campsite, no footprints we could clearly make out in the dark. Just a working flashlight, glowing alone in the middle of the woods. That immediately felt wrong. It wasn't a phone light or a cheap disposable torch. It was a solid electric flashlight, the kind that wouldn't be left behind accidentally. If someone had dropped it earlier that day, the batteries should have been dead by now. Whoever owned it had to have been there recently, probably within the hour. Neither of us could wrap our heads around how someone could simply forget something that bright in a pitch-black forest, which led us to a much worse possibility. Maybe they hadn't forgotten it. Maybe they dropped it while running, and if they didn't come back for it, maybe they were running from something. I felt a chill creep up my spine. That should have been our sign to turn around and leave immediately. Any sane people would have done exactly that. But John and I weren't sane, not when curiosity and adrenaline were involved. Instead of backing away, we decided to leave the flashlight exactly where it was. If someone was coming back for it, we didn't want to mess with it. And if nobody came back, well, we told ourselves it was probably nothing. I took the lead as we continued deeper into the woods. John followed closely behind me, both of us scanning the trees more carefully now, our flashlights sweeping wider arcs through the darkness. We wanted answers. We wanted to understand what we had stumbled into. We didn't even make it 2 minutes past the flashlight when we heard it. A sharp cracking sound behind us. Not one branch, several. 3 or 4 quick snaps in succession. It came from maybe 20 or 30 feet behind John. We both spun around instantly, heart rate spiking, beams darting wildly through the trees. Nothing. No movement. No silhouette. No sound afterward. But our nerves were officially on edge now. We kept walking. 5 minutes later, it happened again. The same sharp cracking noise, fast, heavy, directly behind John. This time, it sounded unmistakably like footsteps moving quickly across the forest floor. Still, nothing appeared in our lights. That second time changed the mood completely. This wasn't fun anymore. This wasn't curiosity or excitement. This was fear. The kind that settles deep in your stomach and doesn't go away. It didn't make sense. Of all the ridiculous things we'd done before, this felt like it should have been harmless. What were the odds of running into someone out here, in this forgotten stretch of woods, in the middle of the night? Yet everything in my body told me we weren't alone. We still didn't have absolute proof that it was a person making those sounds. But it certainly felt like one. The noise repeated again, and again. 5, maybe 6 times in total. Each time, always just behind John, always just out of sight. Then it finally happened. We heard the cracking again, spun around, and this time, I caught movement. Just barely. A shadow slipping behind the trunk of a tree at the edge of our flashlight beams. John saw it too. We froze. Neither of us said a word. We just stood there, staring into the darkness longer than we had any of the previous times. My heart was pounding so loudly, I could feel it in my ears. 10 seconds passed. Then the shadow moved again. A head slowly leaned out from behind the tree. Just enough for us to see the outline of a face in the darkness. That was all it took. We ran. Not walking, not fast walking. Full sprint, crashing through branches, boots slipping on leaves and roots, adrenaline blasting through our bodies. We veered sideways through the trees before turning back in the direction we'd come from, desperate to put distance between us and whatever was watching us. We didn't stop running for at least 5 straight minutes. When we finally slowed down, gasping for air, our lungs burned and our legs felt like jelly. We kept our flashlights dimmed now, not wanting to draw attention, and moved quickly but quietly all the way back toward town. Something else bothered us on the way back. We never passed the flashlight again. The one we'd found on the ground earlier, it was gone. Someone had picked it up. Whoever had been watching us had reclaimed it and turned it off. We made it back to campus shaken, exhausted, and unable to stop replaying what we'd seen. Who had been stalking us out there? Why were they hiding? And what would have happened if we hadn't noticed them when we did? Neither of us had any answers. A few days later, word spread through town about a missing person. Someone had last been seen heading toward the backside of town, the same area near the woods. We never found out if it was connected. No official link, no confirmation. But the timing still haunts me. Maybe we accidentally crossed paths with something we weren't meant to see. Maybe that flashlight belonged to someone who never made it back out of those woods. All I know is this. If we had ignored our instincts, if we had kept walking deeper into the forest, if we hadn't noticed that shadow behind the tree, I don't know if either of us would have made it home that night. Story 2. I almost got kidnapped on a dark highway in the middle of nowhere. And I didn't even realize it until I saw a man sitting in the back seat of the car I was riding in. By the time I understood what was happening, the gas station lights were already passing us by, and the driver wasn't slowing down. A few years ago, I moved from the far west coast to a place about 1,000 miles inland. The drive cut through the northern part of the United States. Not the major highways most people use, but long stretches of secondary roads that barely see traffic unless you're heading toward one of the bigger cities. The scenery was beautiful at first. Endless forests, open plains, quiet towns scattered far apart. But after making the drive back and forth several times during the move, The novelty faded. It became just miles of empty road and long hours alone behind the wheel. This trip was my final run, the last load of leftover boxes stuffed into my trunk. I drove most of the day and reached a small town around 6 in the evening. I pulled over, reclined my seat, and slept for a few hours. Around 9 at night, I got back on the road. For about an hour, everything felt normal. Then my car started acting strange. Warning lights flashed across the dashboard. The steering felt loose and unresponsive, like something inside the car wasn't communicating correctly anymore. At first, I hoped it was just a glitch, maybe a sensor issue or something temporary. But within 5 minutes, it became obvious I couldn't keep driving. The steering felt dangerous. The engine sounded wrong. My gut told me if I pushed it any farther, I might lose control completely. So I pulled onto the gravel shoulder and shut the engine off. It almost felt like a bad joke. Of all the places for my car to die, it had to happen on one of the emptiest stretches of road imaginable. I'd driven this route enough times to know there weren't any towns for at least an hour in either direction. No cell service, no nearby houses. Just dark woods stretching endlessly on both sides of the road. I sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Then I stepped outside to take a look. I didn't know anything about cars, but part of me hoped something obvious would jump out. A loose hose, smoke, something simple. Nothing did. The car looked completely normal, which somehow made the situation worse. As I stood there under the dim roadside lights, I started noticing how unsettling the area actually was. The road was barely illuminated by widely spaced street lamps. Trees pressed in from both sides, forming long black corridors into darkness. No wind, no insects, no distant traffic. Just silence. I remember thinking, half joking to myself, that it felt like the beginning of a horror movie. Still, I didn't have many options. My only real hope was that someone would eventually pass by and offer a ride to the next town or a gas station. So I leaned against my car and waited. About 15 minutes passed before headlights finally appeared in the distance. To my relief, the car slowed and pulled over beside me. A man in his mid-30s rolled down the window. He had a cigarette hanging from his mouth and studied me quietly for a few seconds before asking if I was okay. I explained that my car had broken down and I was stranded. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he kept glancing at his mirrors, scanning the road behind him, like he was nervous about something. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe just cautious driving. But something about his behavior made my skin crawl. Every instinct in my body told me not to get into that car. He finally spoke again. "Well, hop in. I can take you to the next town." The offer sounded reasonable, helpful even, but my gut screamed no. I hesitated for a second, trying to think of a way to decline without sounding suspicious or rude. "I actually have a friend on the way," I lied quickly. "Should be here any minute." I probably should have mentioned that. His mouth curled into a tight, unreadable smirk. Without another word, he rolled his window up and drove away. The moment his taillights disappeared, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I knew I'd made the right call. Unfortunately, no other cars came for a long time. Nearly an hour passed. The cold crept through my jacket. I leaned against the car, half exhausted, fighting sleep. Then headlights appeared again, this time coming from the direction I had been heading. I waved my arms to signal them. The car slowed and pulled over. For a brief second, the vehicle looked familiar. A dark sedan, similar shape and size to the one from earlier. But I dismissed the thought. Plenty of cars look alike in the dark. When the window rolled down, I saw a woman behind the wheel. She looked like she was in her late 20s. Her expression was tense. A nervous smile stretched across her face like she wasn't entirely comfortable being there. She asked if I needed help. I told her I just needed a ride to the nearest gas station or town. She nodded and unlocked the passenger door. This time, I didn't hesitate. I climbed in. The moment the door closed, something felt wrong. The air inside the car felt heavy. The woman didn't say a word. Her hands were tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, eyes wide and fixed on the road ahead. I tried making small talk, asking where she was headed, thanking her for stopping, but she didn't respond. Not even a glance in my direction. She just kept driving in silence. Her behavior made my nerves spike. Most people would at least ask what happened to my car or where exactly I needed to go. She didn't seem curious at all. About 20 minutes passed like that. Then I saw a sign up ahead. Gas station, 2 miles. Relief washed over me. I told her she could drop me off there. She gave a short nod without turning her head. Something about her face bothered me. I glanced at her again and noticed her eyes. They looked scared. Not tired, not annoyed, terrified. That's when I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. Something shifted in the rear-view mirror. I turned my head slightly. My heart dropped. There was a figure in the back seat, slouched low, partially hidden in shadow. As soon as my eyes locked onto him, he straightened up. It was the same man from earlier, the one I had refused to ride with. His face was twisted with anger. I snapped my eyes forward, panic flooding my body, and told the woman to pull into the gas station immediately. But she didn't slow down. She was about to pass it. That's when the realization hit me like ice water. She wasn't in control. She was a victim too. The man in the back seat shouted over me, ordering me to shut up and telling her to keep driving. His voice was sharp and aggressive, filled with threat. I begged her to stop. We were still going fast when suddenly she jerked the wheel hard toward the gas station entrance and slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched as the car barely avoided the pumps. She threw her door open and ran. I followed. We sprinted inside the gas station as the man scrambled into the front seat and sped away into the darkness. The clerk called the police immediately. Both of us were shaking. It turned out exactly as I suspected. The man had been forcing her to pick people up and keep driving. If she hadn't made that turn, I don't want to think about where we might have ended up. Story 3. The police told me later that the man hiding inside my diner had rope, tools, and a buried stash in the woods behind the building. They said he wasn't there to rob the place. He was waiting for me, and if I hadn't heard one small sound at exactly the right moment, I probably wouldn't be alive to tell this story. I used to work overnight at a small 24-hour diner just off the highway. It wasn't glamorous at all. Greasy floors, burnt coffee, flickering fluorescent lights. But the owner was a close friend of mine, and I needed something steady to get by for a while. One good thing about the job was how quiet it usually was. Because the diner sat a little off the highway, most of our customers were truck drivers or people passing through on long road trips. They'd stop for a quick coffee or a late-night meal, then disappear back into the darkness of the road. But overnight shifts were almost always dead. Most nights I'd get 2 or 3 customers early on, and then nothing for hours. This night started the same way. A couple truckers stopped in for coffee and left. After that, the diner went completely silent. No cars pulling in, no headlights passing by, just the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, and the empty highway stretching past the windows. I sat by the counter, staring outside, letting my thoughts wander. Sometime around 1 in the morning, headlights finally appeared in the parking lot. A large truck pulled in. I walked around the counter and greeted the 2 men as they came inside. Both looked exhausted, the kind of tired you only get after driving for endless hours. They ordered exactly what everyone else had ordered that night, 2 black coffees to go. While I started brewing their drinks, one of them went to the restroom. The other leaned against the counter and watched me for a moment. Then he asked a strange question. "You're not alone here tonight, are you?" The question caught me off guard. I hesitated for half a second, trying to figure out what he meant. He didn't sound threatening, more concerned than anything. So I decided to be honest. "Yeah, just me. It's been slow." His eyebrows pulled together slightly. He looked confused, almost disappointed. "Well, just be careful," he said quietly. "We saw a guy standing near the side of the building when we pulled in. Looked like he didn't belong there. My stomach tightened. I thought maybe he worked here, the man added. That's why I asked. I thanked him for telling me. Right then, the other guy came back from the restroom. I handed them their coffees, and they left, their truck disappearing back onto the highway. After they were gone, I went straight to the windows and scanned the parking lot. Nothing. No cars, no movement, no footprints, just empty asphalt and dark woods surrounding the diner. I'd been watching outside all night. I would have noticed someone wandering around the building, and we didn't even have parking on the sides or back. Still, the guy didn't seem like he was lying. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside to walk around the building. The darkness pressed in from the tree line. The woods felt too close, too quiet. I walked the entire perimeter of the diner, shining my phone flashlight along the walls and behind dumpsters. No one. The cold air raised goosebumps on my arms. I didn't linger long and went back inside, telling myself the trucker was probably just tired and mistaken. Still, I stayed alert. The diner stayed dead quiet for another long stretch of time. I cleaned dishes, wiped down counters, swept the floor. Eventually, I took a quick break and went to the restroom. I was scrolling on my phone when I heard it. The door opening. That sound was unmistakable. The front door had a very specific creak when someone entered. I finished quickly and walked back out, automatically calling out, "Welcome in!" My voice echoed through the empty diner. No one was there. Every booth was empty. No one at the counter, no movement anywhere. My stomach twisted. I knew what I had heard. I walked to the front door and pushed it open, peering outside. Nothing, no cars, no footsteps, no wind strong enough to move the door. I tested the door a few times. It didn't swing open on its own. It was heavy and stiff. That uneasy feeling crept back in. I thought about what the trucker said. Someone near the building. I tried to shake it off and went back behind the counter to finish dishes. Then I heard something else. Movement. Not outside. Inside. I shut off the water and listened. Before I could even step around the corner to investigate, a man appeared from the back hallway. He looked about 40. Messy, dark hair streaked with gray. A scruffy beard. He wore a worn navy hoodie and looked like he hadn't slept properly in days. He smiled casually and slid into a seat at the counter like he belonged there. My blood ran cold. I hadn't heard him enter. He had come from the back of the building. "I'll have a coffee," he said calmly. I nodded slowly and started brewing it, my hands trembling slightly. I could feel his eyes locked onto me the entire time. The silence felt thick and heavy. I handed him the cup. He smiled again. "Just you here tonight?" he asked. "Must get lonely." "Sometimes," I replied cautiously. He kept talking. "What time do they make you work until? 3? 4 in the morning?" I lied and said my schedule changed constantly. Finally, he stood up, thanked me, and walked out. I watched through the window as he didn't get into any car. He simply walked toward the highway and disappeared into the darkness. My heart wouldn't slow down. Something about him felt wrong, deeply wrong. I kept my eyes glued to the windows for the next 15 minutes, afraid to turn my back. Then I heard it again. A door opening. Not the front door. The side access door. The one that led toward the dumpsters and storage hallway. Adrenaline hit instantly. I rushed toward the hallway. One of the closet doors was swinging slightly, as if someone had just moved it. I didn't hesitate. I ran to my car, jumped in, and drove onto the highway while calling the police. When officers arrived, they found him, hiding in the closet. But that wasn't the worst part. He had rope on him. And in the woods behind the diner, police discovered a buried stash filled with disturbing equipment meant for harming someone. They told me later he had likely been watching the diner, waiting to confirm I was alone, planning to grab me and drag me into the woods. If I hadn't noticed that door, I don't like thinking about what would have happened. Story 4. There are some sounds you never forget. Not screams, not gunshots. Not anything dramatic like that. I mean the small sounds. A soft click in a quiet house. A single step on a floorboard that shouldn't be under anyone's weight. The kind of sounds that make your brain whisper. That wasn't the house settling. It started 3 weeks after I moved into apartment 6C. It wasn't even a bad place. Cheap for the area, clean enough, and close to my job. The building was older, but it had that vintage charm landlords love to brag about. Narrow halls, heavy doors, thick paint layered over the years like it was trying to bury the past. The day I signed the lease, the property manager, an older woman named Marlene, handed me 2 keys and said, "These are the only copies." She looked me in the eyes when she said it, like she wanted me to believe it. I did. The first few nights were normal. I unpacked, ate takeout, fell asleep with the TV on. I even started to relax. The neighborhood was quieter than my last place, and for once, the silence felt like a gift. Then one morning I woke up and found my bedroom door cracked open. I always closed it before sleeping, always. It was a habit I picked up as a kid. My mom used to say, "Doors don't keep monsters out, but they keep you feeling like they do." I remember staring at that gap, still half asleep, and telling myself I must have left it open. But I knew I didn't. I checked the locks right away. Front door locked, deadbolt engaged, the chain latched, windows closed, everything exactly how I left it. The first time I brushed it off. The second time, I didn't. Because the second time, it wasn't just the bedroom door. It was the kitchen cabinet above the sink. Open. Not wide open, just enough to notice it if you were looking. Like someone had opened it, hesitated, then changed their mind and walked away. I told myself the hinge was loose. Maybe it drifted open on its own. But when I pushed it shut, it clicked into place like it always did. Not loose, not crooked, just open. I tried to ignore it. Everyone misplaces things. Everyone forgets small details. Stress messes with memory. Then I started finding evidence I couldn't explain. A spoon in the drying rack when I hadn't washed dishes. A paper towel torn off and folded on the counter like someone had wiped something small. My couch pillow flipped over, seam side up, like it had been picked up and set down again. Little things, harmless things. But they didn't feel harmless at 2 in the morning when the whole apartment was silent, and you suddenly realized you were holding your breath for no reason. I bought a cheap door alarm first, the kind that beeps if the door opens. Then I bought a camera, just a small one, motion activated, pointed at the front door and the main living area. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I'd check it for a week, prove to my brain that nothing was happening, then return it. That was the plan. That night I took extra time locking up. I tested the deadbolt twice. I made sure the chain was secure. I even pushed against the door like that would somehow prove reality. Then I went to bed. I slept like I always do, light, restless, waking up for no clear reason. At 3:12 a.m., I sat up so fast my neck popped. I don't know what woke me. I didn't hear a crash or a voice. It was more like my body sensed something and dragged my mind out of sleep before I could argue. The apartment was dark. The air felt thick, still. And then I heard it. A faint click. Not from the building, not from a pipe, from inside my apartment. I froze, staring into the darkness, waiting for my brain to rationalize it. But nothing came. I reached for my phone, and the screen lit the room just enough to make the shadows feel deeper. No notifications, no alarm. Just 3:12 a.m., and my heartbeat punching my ribs. I stayed in bed, listening. Nothing. For almost a minute, it was completely silent. Then, very softly, so softly I almost convinced myself I imagined it, I heard the sound of a drawer sliding. Not a full pull, just the first inch. The whisper of wood moving on rails. In the kitchen. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened like my life depended on it. Because it did. After a few seconds, I heard another sound. A footstep. Slow. Careful. The kind of step someone takes when they're trying not to be heard. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like it left my body. I slid out of bed as quietly as possible and moved to the corner of the room where I could see the hallway through the crack of my door. The crack was small. The hall was dark, but there was something different about the darkness, a shape blocking it, like someone was standing just beyond the doorway. I felt my legs start to shake, not from fear like you see in movies, heroic, dramatic fear. This was ugly fear, the kind that makes your muscles weak and your thoughts scatter. The shape didn't move, it just stood there. And then, so quietly it was almost tender, the bedroom door handle started to turn. The handle didn't jerk or rattle. It turned slowly, like whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world. I stepped back from the door without thinking. My phone clutched so hard my fingers went numb. I had no weapon, no plan, no call the police confidence. Just the sick awareness that someone was right there, and they were trying to enter as quietly as possible. The handle stopped. For a long second, nothing happened. Then the pressure against the door changed, subtle, controlled, like they were testing it, feeling for the lock, the chain, the deadbolt, whatever I'd done to keep myself safe. My mouth went dry. I backed up to my dresser and crouched, trying to make myself small in the shadow of my closet, like that would make me invisible. My phone screen had dimmed. I tapped it once and immediately regretted it. Light spilled across my hands, my face. I killed the screen fast. The hallway stayed silent. Then I heard it again. Another soft movement, not from the door this time, but from farther out. A slow, careful step retreating, like whoever was there had decided not to force it. I waited. 30 seconds. A full minute. My heart was loud enough I felt sure it would give me away. Finally, I crept toward the door again and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. No breathing. No footsteps. Only the distant hum of the building. Pipes, settling walls, the kind of background noise you don't notice until you desperately need proof you're not alone. I reached for my phone and dialed 911. And stopped. Because as my thumb hovered over the call button, my brain did that awful thing where it tries to protect you by arguing. What do you say? I heard a door handle. I think someone's inside. Maybe it was a dream. I hated that part of myself. I hated how fear can make you second-guess your own senses. So instead of calling, I did the stupid thing. I opened my camera app, the security camera feed. My hands shook so hard the screen blurred. I pulled up the playback timeline and dragged it back to a few minutes earlier. There I was, asleep in the bedroom, obviously not visible. But the living room was in frame. The front door, the hallway, the edge of the kitchen. For a while, nothing happened. Then at 3:11 a.m., the motion sensor triggered. The hallway light didn't turn on. No bright reveal. Just the camera switching into that grainy night mode where everything looks like a smear of shadows. I leaned closer until my nose almost touched the screen. At first, I thought the camera had misfired. Maybe heat from the vents, maybe a bug. And then I saw it. A shape, sliding along the wall. Not rushing, not stumbling, moving with quiet intention. It came from the kitchen side, not the front door. That hit me like ice. Because it meant the person didn't enter through my locked door. They were already inside. The figure moved toward the hallway that led to my bedroom. Then it paused, as if listening, as if checking whether I was awake. And then, the figure raised an arm, long and pale in the night filter, and reached toward where the bedroom door would be, just out of the camera's view. My stomach twisted as I realized the click I heard was probably them touching something. Maybe my doorknob, maybe the chain on my door, maybe something else. Then the figure did something that made my skin go cold in a way I can't fully describe. It turned its head toward the camera, not like it noticed movement, like it knew exactly where the lens was. And for half a second, I saw a face. Not clearly, just enough. The vague outline of features and the glint of eyes. Watching. The figure stepped backward into the kitchen doorway and vanished out of frame. The motion light on the camera stayed triggered for another minute. recording nothing but empty darkness. I sat there in my bedroom, staring at the footage, and the fear finally stopped being confusing. It became simple. Get out. I didn't pack properly. I didn't grab valuables. I threw on shoes, shoved my wallet and keys into my pocket, and grabbed my phone charger like my brain was still clinging to normal routines. Before leaving, I did one more thing. I checked the front door locks. The deadbolt was still engaged. The chain was still latched. No forced entry. No broken anything. Just a locked door that hadn't kept anyone out because no one had come through it. I stepped into the hallway of the building and didn't even look back. I drove to a 24-hour gas station and sat under the brightest lights I could find, hands shaking on the steering wheel, watching my apartment building from memory like it was still staring at me. At 3:47 a.m., I called the police. When they arrived, I showed them the footage. The officer watched it twice without speaking. Then he asked me a question that made my mouth go dry again. "Is there any other way into your unit?" he said. "Any maintenance access, attic crawl, shared vents?" "I don't think so," I said. "It's just an apartment." He nodded slowly, like he didn't like that answer. They went in with me at dawn. 2 officers, flashlights out, hands near their belts. The apartment looked normal. Too normal. No signs of a struggle. No mess. Nothing stolen. But when the officer checked my kitchen, he paused at the drawer under the sink. He pulled it open, and I felt my throat tighten. Because inside, neatly placed like someone trying to be polite, was a key. Not mine. A dull, old, brass key. The kind that looks like it's been copied 100 times. The officer held it up between 2 fingers. "Is this yours?" I shook my head. He looked at the lock on my front door, then at the key. Then he did something that made my knees weak. He walked to the door and tested it. The key slid in perfectly. It turned, smooth as butter, as if it belonged there. The lock clicked open like it had been waiting for that key all along. The officer turned the knob, opened the door a few inches, then closed it again slowly, his expression tight. "That shouldn't exist," he said quietly. I felt my legs go weak and had to lean against the counter. The idea that someone had been able to unlock my door whenever they wanted, without breaking anything, without leaving a trace, made my skin crawl. Every night I'd slept there, every shower I'd taken, every time I'd walked around in the dark thinking I was alone. Someone else could have been inside. The officers searched the apartment again, this time more carefully. Cabinets, closet, bathroom, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. They even checked the vents and the ceiling access panel. Nothing. No signs of anyone hiding. No fingerprints that could be pulled clean enough to identify. No obvious entry point besides the door. The key was the only proof that something had happened at all. One of the officers asked if I had ever given a spare key to anyone. Friends, family, a landlord, a cleaner, anyone. I hadn't. The building management claimed they didn't keep copies for tenants unless requested. And even if they did, the style of the key didn't match their system. It wasn't labeled, it wasn't logged, it didn't belong. It was just there. A key that opened my home. They took it as evidence, told me they'd file a report, and advised me not to stay there until the locks were changed. I didn't argue. I packed a bag and stayed with a friend across town that morning, barely able to sleep even in a place that actually had people around. Every small sound made me jump. Every shadow felt like movement. Later that day, the landlord replaced every lock on my door. New deadbolt, new handle, new hardware. He apologized over and over, swearing he'd never seen that key before, that no previous tenant should have had access anymore. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But something kept bothering me. That camera footage, the way the figure moved like it knew the apartment, the way it looked directly at the camera, not curious, not surprised, familiar, like it had done this before. I went back to the apartment that evening with my friend to grab the rest of my things. The place felt different, not haunted, not cold, just wrong. like walking into a room where you know someone was recently standing behind you, even if you can't prove it. We packed quickly. As I unplugged the camera from the outlet, something caught my eye behind the entertainment stand. A faint scuff mark on the wall, low, close to the baseboard. I crouched down. It looked like the paint had been rubbed away slightly, like something hard had scraped against it repeatedly. My friend asked what I was looking at. I didn't answer right away, because once I saw it, I realized what it probably was. The edge of a door, not the front door. The small utility door that led into the shared maintenance corridor behind the walls. A panel I had never opened, never touched, barely noticed. I walked over and pulled on it gently. It opened. Behind it was a narrow maintenance passage, dusty and dim, running between the walls of several units. Pipes ran along the ceiling. Old wiring was clipped to the beams. It smelled like insulation and stale air. Anyone inside that corridor could move between sections of the building without ever stepping into the main hallway, without cameras, without being seen. My stomach turned. I imagined someone slipping through that space late at night, pausing behind thin drywall, listening, waiting, learning routines, finding the perfect moment, the perfect door, the perfect spare key. I shut the panel and locked it with a heavy chair jammed against it, even though we were leaving anyway. The landlord later sealed it and added a lock after I showed him. They never found the person who had been inside my apartment. No matching reports, no fingerprints, no neighbors who saw anything strange. Just a key, just footage of a shadow, just the knowledge that someone had been watching me from inside my own walls. I moved out of that apartment a month later. Different building, different neighborhood, different locks. But even now, years later, I still check every door before going to bed. Every window, every closet. And sometimes, when the apartment is quiet and the lights are off, I swear I can still hear the faintest sound of metal turning softly in a lock that no longer exists. Story 5. I don't have kids. That's important to understand. The baby monitor wasn't even mine. I found it while cleaning out the storage closet in my apartment. It must have belonged to the previous tenant. A small white camera with a cracked screen and a handheld receiver still wrapped in faded plastic. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. I plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy static in the corner of my living room where I'd set the camera. The audio worked too. Every small sound echoed through the speaker with a faint hiss. I laughed at how pointless it was and left it on the kitchen counter, meaning to unplug it later. That night, around 1:40 a.m., the monitor woke me up. Not with static, with breathing, slow, soft, rhythmic. I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, listening. At first, I thought it was my own breathing echoing through the speaker from across the apartment. Maybe the camera was picking up airflow or the hum of the building. But then the breathing paused. A quiet, dry whisper followed. "Hello?" My stomach tightened instantly. I grabbed the monitor and turned on the screen. The camera showed my living room exactly as I'd left it. Couch, coffee table, shadows resting in familiar places. No movement. I spoke softly, feeling ridiculous. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then the whisper returned. "I see you." My heart slammed against my ribs. I scanned the screen again, turning the volume higher. Nothing moved, no shapes, no shifting shadows. Just empty space. I muted the monitor and shoved it into a drawer, telling myself it had to be interference from another device in the building. Some crossed signal. A prank. Anything logical. I barely slept. The next night, I unplugged the camera completely and left it in the closet. At 2:12 a.m., I heard the whisper directly in my bedroom. Not from the monitor. From the corner near the door. "Don't turn me off." My eyes snapped open. The room was dark and silent. My door was closed. My phone lay untouched on the nightstand. No TV, no speakers, no reason for a voice to exist in that space. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. I didn't sleep again. The next morning, I threw the monitor into a dumpster 3 blocks away. I watched it disappear beneath a pile of trash. That night felt calmer, safer, quiet. Until 3:03 a.m. A soft electronic crackle came from my nightstand. I sat up slowly. My phone screen was dark, but beside it was the baby monitor receiver, powered on. The screen glowed with static. A whisper slid through the speaker. "You forgot the camera." I didn't wait to see anything else. I grabbed my keys, ran out of the apartment barefoot, and drove straight to a friend's place across town. I left everything behind. When I returned with daylight and another person, the monitor was gone. No receiver, no camera, no cords, no sign it had ever existed. But sometimes, late at night, when the apartment is completely silent, I still hear faint static coming from the walls, and I never sleep facing the door anymore.